That's my country. That's that's where my heart is. That's where my heart is.
You all right?
Yeah.
One song, one lyric, and the last Bee Gees standing breaks. At 78, Barry Gibb still performs, still smiles through the applause. But there's one song he avoids, not because of the charts, but because of the ghosts. Fans see the legend, but they don't see the tears.
It was about flower power because, everyone went through that phrase. Massachusetts was our way of saying flower power is an era of itself, in itself, and it will pass, and you better go home.
What song could make a music icon crumble? And is it true? There's an unreleased recording from Andy that he's kept hidden for decades. You're about to hear the truth. We'll reveal the one song Barry Gibb admits still breaks him, and the stories he's never fully told. The last Bee Gee standing. When Barry Gibb walks on stage today, the applause still roars. His voice may be older, but the falsetto remains. The songs still land. And the legacy? Untouchable. But there's a silence wrapped around him now that even sold-out arenas can't fill, because Barry Gibb isn't just a performer. He's a survivor. The last remaining thread in a tapestry once woven by four brothers. One by one, that thread has frayed, unraveling a musical dynasty that once defined generations. Now, at 78, Barry isn't just singing Bee Gees songs, he's singing to ghosts. To the world, he's the legend, the icon, the voice behind Stayin' Alive. But when Barry looks out over the crowds these days, the cheers must sound different. Because while they scream for the Bee Gees are gone, and have been, piece by piece, for decades. Andy, Maurice, and Robin, each one gone too soon. Each one taking a piece of Barry's heart with them. The youngest of the siblings, Andy Gibb, was the first to leave. The boy was charming, handsome, and blessed with a voice that could slide easily through a radio. He lit up the late 70s pop charts with his voice. But, in the end, the glory consumed him. Addiction, depression, and almost impossible expectations shattered what even Barry could not, if attempted himself, to hold. At 30, he died, 5 days after his birthday. Barry gave a eulogy, but he rarely sings Andy's songs anymore. Not because they weren't good. They're just too painful. In came Maurice to turn things around. If Barry was the originator and Robin the spirit, then it was Maurice the glue, the anchor in the storm. His death in 2003 from some complications resulting from a twisted intestine came too suddenly, involving no warning or goodbyes. The Bee Gees again became three, but something had already changed. Barry's faith in the band was waning. He and Robin kept at it, but it wasn't the same. Backstage, there was no humor, no instinctive musical shorthand. There was just a shadow where a heartbeat had once been. And then, in 2012, came Robin. Cancer, slow, cruel, and public. His passing wasn't something unexpected, but it didn't really make it any easier. For Barry, Robin wasn't simply a brother. He was a sound twin, a harmony created over decades. From childhood on, their voices were inseparable. Even as their musical tastes changed and the praise or derision heaped upon the Bee Gees fluctuated, Barry and Robin remained a unit. The final crack was Robin's death. Barry later said, "I see them, I hear them, but they're not here." That is the part of the audience neither of these sees. The empty wing of the stage where Barry used to glance when a harmony hit just right. The instinct to turn and not find anybody there. The applause is echoing too loudly in the after dark now. Because really, When you lose your bandmates, you lose a part of your artistry. But when those bandmates are blood brothers, the whole of your history, you lose a piece of yourself. And Barry has had to carry that through private loss and public loss. The interviews, the tribute concerts, the endless retellings of how the Bee Gees changed music. But very few, if any, have ever considered what that legacy cost him, what it feels like left alone to tell the rest of the tale. Barry Gibb never wanted, in other words, to be a solo act. His career was not a shrine for ego or solitude. The career he built is one of harmony, that is, unity, the sound of voices blending in a way that only family can manage. And now, every time he takes the stage, he does so alone. Not because he wants to, because he has to. But the cracks started long before Robin and Maurice were gone. They began with the brother who never even made it to 31. Andy Gibb, the first goodbye. Before the glitter, before the stadiums, and long before the grief, there was Andy. The youngest of the Gibb brothers, Andy wasn't just the baby of the family, he was the promise. The bright-eyed dreamer, with a voice soaked in charm, and a smile that made radio execs lean forward. He wasn't officially a BG, not in the discography, not in the album credits. But to Barry, he was more than that. Andy was a little brother, a shadow who looked up to the stars his older siblings had already become, and wanted to join them. Barry Gibb didn't just support Andy's career, he engineered it, wrote his debut single, co-produced his biggest hits. Shadow dancing? That was Barry. In fact, it stayed at #1 for 7 weeks in 1978, the same year the Bee Gees were already dominating with their Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. The Gibb family wasn't just hot, they were untouchable, and Andy seemed destined to follow, if not surpass, their fame. But while Barry had his brothers with whom to ground himself, Andy was all alone at the highest pedestal. He had barely crossed the age of 19 when #1 hits followed back to back. Fame came on the scene much sooner than anyone could have ever anticipated. Too soon. The cameras adored him. The fans loved him. The magazines would not leave him alone. Unseen and unheard, however, was Andy getting undone. The limelight did not fill him. It exposed every fissure. He was anxious. He needed the security of praise. And, most dangerously, he searched for the solace to numb the hurt in all the wrong places. Barry saw it all. Looking from the outside, he was a producer and mentor to Andy. However, inside, he was nothing but a brother, helplessly watching a man he loved disappeared into himself. For Barry, the fight against addiction was not a headline. It was a crisis that occurred in front of his eyes every day. Rehab stints, unsuccessful comebacks, and peaks of hope that never seemed to last. He never gave up, but he was never sure that he was doing enough. The hardest part? Barry has admitted to a distance between them in those last few years. Not due to anger, not from a fight, just space, misunderstandings, and silence. Two brothers on opposite sides of the same pain, not knowing how to reach out to each other. Barry would reflect on that in interviews years later. "I didn't know what to say," he confessed. "I didn't know how to be what he needed." Then came March 10th, 1988. Andy Gibb died just 5 days past his 30th birthday. Officially, it was myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart. But everyone knew the underlying reason. Years of emotional torture and physical wear and tear had taken their toll. Barry delivered a eulogy. He held it together for the cameras. But something cracked inside him after. He avoided any performance of songs written by his brother. He kept his distance from probing interviews. It is said by friends that certain stories were sealed away, not due to shame, but rather because the pain from the loss of the brother was so raw. There was one song in particular that Barry never could listen to, as reported by those closest to him. A song inextricably linked with Andy's voice. A song that wasn't released to the public. A song said to be the last thing Andy ever recorded. And one message Barry has been carrying ever since. Whether those tapes exist is one thing, but one thing is for certain. Losing Andy was the first crack in Barry's world. And it wasn't only about losing a brother. It was about losing someone whom, in his mind, Barry could have saved, but didn't. That kind of loss does not fade. It finds its way into the harmonics, and into all those pregnant pauses between the songs, and into the split seconds before even attempting to sing the first note of that particular song. And just before Andy died, he left something behind. A song, a message, maybe even a secret Barry has never shared publicly. The rumored demo tape. It's one of the most whispered about pieces of Bee Gees lore. A tape. A final song. Not from Barry, Maurice, or Robin, but from Andy. A raw, unfinished demo that, according to insiders, was never meant for the public. Not because it wasn't good enough, but because it was too personal, too painful, and maybe too final. The story starts in the late 1980s, during one of Andy's attempts at recovery. He'd checked into rehab, made plans to restart his career, and had even begun spending more time in the studio. Friends and producers described those last sessions as emotionally charged. Andy wasn't the same golden-voiced star from the covers of Tiger Beat. His vocals were rougher, more fragile, but the vulnerability in his delivery was undeniable. This wasn't an artist chasing chart positions. This was a man trying to say something, maybe even say goodbye. Andy recorded a number of acoustic demos during those last months in 1987, according to 2 separate biographers and a handful of studio sources. Most of them were never released. One was special, though. No title has ever been definitively assigned. No lyrics have been published. But the story is that this song was delivered directly into Barry's hands. A private message caught on tape and never heard again. Since then, Barry has never been willing to discuss the demo, much less confirm its existence, and perhaps he never will. But the rumor survives, not in the tabloids, but rather in a quiet understanding shared by a few with an acquaintance of the Gibb family. An ex-studio technician claimed in an interview off the record that the song was unfinished, but pure. Another one claimed Barry was broken down by it in a way no other recording has ever done. For me, the great mystique surrounding the possible tape stems not only from the exact fact that it could have bled into history as Andy's final song, but from what it symbolizes. A last desperate attempt to touch. A farewell letter is put in the notes. Even a potential apology masked in lyrics, which only Barry was meant to hear. If it were true that Barry has kept the tape to himself for these last 30 years, the reasons for that decision would be very much apparent. Some songs aren't for audiences. They're for closure. And sometimes, closure does not come. So why haven't these songs ever seen the light of day? The brothers Gibb have always released anything that could be marketed. Barry has overseen box set releases, made tributes, and honored his brothers in every possible manner. Except for this song, which, to this day, if it exists, remains locked in a vault. Maybe that too is by design, perhaps too sacred, too painful. Or maybe Barry just thinks that giving it away at a would be like pouring salt on a wound that never has healed. There is also another theory, which is just as heartbreaking. Some people believe that Barry listens to it alone, that he plays the demo privately on Andy's birthday or the anniversary of his death, to hear Andy's unfiltered, unguarded, untouched voice from the world that broke him. A brother recalls being a brother instead of a performer, remembering a partner. The recording also may not be on a studio reel or closed in a vault. It conceivably is a cassette, a whisper on tape, caught during a moment and kept only because Barry couldn't bear to erase it from. Bootlegs? None. Leaks? None. Only silence. And in that silence, an entire world of emotion. One might refer to the statement Barry made in an interview, "I always wonder if I could have done more." And if the tape is real, maybe that is precisely the thing why he never shared it. It is more than just a song. It's a wound. But even before that secret track, there was a song the brothers gave away, not knowing it would one day become a tribute to everything they'd lose. The song that changed meaning. In 1997, when the Bee Gees were asked to write a ballad for Celine Dion, it wasn't supposed to be emotional. At least, not for them. By that point, Barry, Robin, and Maurice had already been to the top twice. They'd survived the backlash from disco, reinvented themselves, and were comfortably settled into music royalty. So when the request came for a song that would suit Celine's voice, powerful, emotional, enduring, the brothers simply did what they always did. They wrote from the heart. And Immortality was born. On the surface, it was just another brilliant collaboration. The Bee Gees wrote the song, Celine would record it, and beneath her soaring vocals, the brothers laid down their signature harmonies, subtle but unmistakable. The lyrics told the story of someone determined to live on, to carry their truth into the future, no matter the cost. It was poetic, almost spiritual. But back then, it didn't carry the weight it would come to hold. For Barry, Immortality was just a song, until everything changed. When Maurice died in 2003, Immortality took on a new form. Suddenly, it wasn't only the lyrics that were poetic. They suddenly began to sound prophetic. So this is who I am, and this is all I know. Now it was no longer about Celine's voice, or an anthem that could be ready for a soundtrack. It got personal. Barry had lost not just a brother, but his musical twin, the Bee Gees' engine. Maurice had always been the quiet one, the glue that kept everything held together. His absence created more than just a space in the band, but left Barry totally exposed. The final blow, though, came in 2012, Robin. If Maurice is the machine, Robin is the soul, the voice that has been harmonizing with Barry's since they were children. The two voices blended like only siblings could, effortlessly and instinctively. When Robin died following a prolonged battle against cancer, Immortality transformed yet another time. The lines that had been inscribed several years before all of a sudden reverberated every loss that Barry suffered. I'll make my journey through eternity. I keep the memory of you and me inside. Barry began performing the song by himself, but he didn't sing it by himself. Then it happened. Dimming of the lights. Barry would stand in a single spotlight, while behind him, recorded harmonies of Maurice and Robin would be piped through the speakers. As if they were there, their taped voices would softly fold into the performance. And during those moments, the audience ceased to see a performer. They saw a man in mourning. Fans say the change was palpable in the room. This ceremony was much more than a tribute. It was communion. Barry was not just singing to a crowd. Now he was singing with the ghosts. And when the line, "We Don't Say Goodbye" was sung, in that moment, it wasn't merely a line in a song, it was a promise. A promise not to let go of those who stood with him in the spotlight. Barry has said in interviews that this song makes him cry. Not because of its popularity, not because of the applause, but because when he sings it, he hears his brothers. Not in memory, but in stereo. It is almost as if they are stepping back into the room again, if only for a moment. And that is what breaks him, not fame, not nostalgia, the echo. Immortality wasn't the only song soaked in meaning. One was written decades earlier, and it hits Barry in a different way entirely. A living eulogy. It's the kind of song that sneaks up on you, soft, melancholic, and deceptively simple. I Started a Joke, written and sung by Barry Gibb in 1968, didn't top every chart. It wasn't the flashy hit, but it stuck. Decades later, it's still one of the Bee Gees' most hauntingly remembered tracks. Not because of its commercial success, but because of the ache in every word. And for Barry, it's become more than a song. It's a living eulogy, a confession, and a reminder of everything he's lost. When Robin first stepped forward to sing I Started a Joke, he wasn't trying to make a statement. In fact, he never fully explained what the song meant. Some critics called it religious. Others said it was existential, but none of them really knew. Robin didn't offer interpretations. He didn't need to. The music did all the speaking. The lyrics read like poetry born from a private sorrow. I started a joke, which started the whole world crying. But I didn't see that the joke was on me. There's no bravado in the words, no spectacle, just a quiet, soul-deep sadness. And it's that emotional honesty that gave the song its power, and why Barry can barely get through it now. In 2012, with the passing of Robin, Barry finally took to performing I Started a Joke solo. Not every night, and not at every concert. But whenever he did, there was no mistaking it. Everything in the atmosphere changed. The lights would dim to a cool blue. Barry would step forward with his guitar as the one voice to a mere memory. There would be no harmonies, no tricks, just the true weight of one voice singing another's unforgotten legacy. And those moments were the ones the fans would say everything was evident. The heartache, the uncertainty, and the history. Barry never needed to explain the song's meaning to him. It was one of those things that Robin wrote, Robin sang, and Robin suffered with. In Barry's hands, it has become a whole different kind of lament. A song about his brother, who carried the heavier load of grief. And perhaps it serves as Barry's own whispered apology, wanting to forgive all the unresolved misunderstandings, all the half-finished conversations, and all the laughter that never saw the light of day. He choked up more than once during the performance. His voice would break, his hands would shake. For a split second, the professionalism would drop. The years of showbiz would drop. The audience held their breaths with him because they knew this is not entertainment. It's a memorial. I'm not capable of seeing the joke intended for me. This line, once abstract, now resonates painfully literally. The Bee Gees were ridiculed for their falsetto voices, their disco glam, and their extremely extravagant stage presence. Yet, underneath it all was something tangible. Three brothers who made up music because of their bond. And today, only one is left. I Started a Joke, in Barry's hands, becomes more than just that hit from the 60s. It becomes a farewell and a reckoning as well. It's not just Robin's voice ringing in those words. It is Barry daring the silence that followed. For I Started a Joke was not meant to be a farewell. But alas, it sounds like one now. A song written long before tragedy struck. Now somehow feels as if meant forever for that moment. While I Started a Joke makes Barry cry in public, there's one song tied to Andy that he avoids completely, and for good reason. To love somebody or lose somebody. Long before the disco balls, before the Bee Gees became global icons, there was a simple, soulful ballad written in 1967 that would quietly become one of the most enduring songs of their catalog. To Love Somebody. It wasn't flashy. It didn't ride the wave of a cultural movement, but it landed deeply. Originally written for Otis Redding, who tragically died before he could record it, the song became a defining early moment for the Bee Gees. And for Barry, it would later become something even more powerful. A hymn for heartbreak, a song he couldn't sing without seeing Andy's face. Barry and Robin had written To Love Somebody with soul in mind, soul rather like timeless American R&B. The words were universal, the melody stripped down and emotional. There was longing in that sound, regret, and an unspoken need. You don't know what it's like to love somebody the way I love you. It was a love song at the time, but decades later, with three brothers gone, it came to mean something else entirely, especially when it came to Andy. Andy was never in the band officially, but he was always present. Barry wrote songs for him, produced his records, and even launched his career. Obviously, more than a little brother was the type of little brother Barry sought to protect. But there were limits. Fame had taken hold of Andy too young, too fast. Addiction, insecurity, the Gibb name all weighed heavier than ever on him. And Barry couldn't stop the spiral for all his wisdom and experience. 30 years went by, and anything left of the family was shattered. Barry gave the eulogy. In public, he managed to hold himself together. But behind his eyes, something had changed. Barry would not talk much about Andy's last months in the years that followed, not because he was avoiding it, but rather because it was simply too much to bear. He had stood by Andy, tried to help him the best way he could, but it had never been enough. When Barry sings To Love Somebody now, a change occurs. The audience can see it. Very subtle, though, a shift in stance, a pause right before the first note, and a line delivered with just a tiny fraction more tenderness than the rest. This isn't just a song. It's a confession. It's a memory. It's woven into every line, a quiet apology. The song doesn't directly mention Andy. It wasn't written for him. But the rasp in Barry's voice makes it directly associated with that grief. A fan at a recent concert said, "He wasn't singing it to us. He was singing it to someone who wasn't there." Another fan noted how Barry occasionally would look up during the verses, as if searching for someone in the wings, someone who was once near enough to reach. To Love Somebody is a deeply emotional song, about that pain of loving someone who might never understand. And when you apply that to Barry and Andy's story, it is super hurtful. Because Andy never really felt worthy of the love he got. And Barry, maybe even now, is still trying to convince him. That's the strength behind a song like this. It doesn't need to be a eulogy to become one. It doesn't have to be rewritten to speak the truth. Sometimes, the truth is just sitting there on the table, waiting for the moment and heartbreak that might bring true clarity. There's more to grief than songs, and more to Barry's silence than stage lighting. Because his tears don't always fall in front of us. A silence that speaks louder. There are interviews where Barry Gibb is animated, reminiscing about tour buses, studio magic, and the madness of the disco era. He'll laugh about costumes, joke about falsetto, even reflect on the highs and lows of being both a brother and a bandmate. But then there are moments, quiet ones, when the questions dip below the surface. When someone asks about Andy, or Maurice, or Robin. And that's when Barry does something he rarely did in his youth. He goes silent. It's not the silence of forgetting. It's the silence of remembering too much. After decades in the spotlight, Barry knows how to navigate interviews. But when asked directly, "What's the one song that still breaks you?" he doesn't give a title. He doesn't need to. For Barry, grief isn't always something you speak. It's something you carry. And the music, as powerful as it is, doesn't always do justice to what's been lost. Some emotions are too deep for lyrics. Some memories are too sacred for melody. Fans have speculated. Is it Immortality? Is it I Started a Joke? Is it the rumored Andy demo, locked away in a drawer somewhere, never to be heard by anyone else? Maybe it's all of them. Maybe it's none. Because sometimes the most painful reminder isn't in a specific song, it's in the moment just before the music starts. The breath before the chord. The memory that hits before the first word is even sung. Barry has sometimes stood under spotlights intended for 3 tribute concerts. The grandeur of the stage, once a space full of synchronized movements and glorious harmonies, could now be called a shrine. He has, however, admitted that he still hears his brothers when he sings. Not as a metaphor, but in a very real sense. Right now, he waits for their voices. He feels their presence in the harmonies. But they never arrive. And still, he sings. What else is there to do when you're the last guy standing? And maybe this explains why Barry has never revealed that one song to break him. Because it is about more than one song. It's about a whole lifetime. A sound that now flows outside the great river in real time. A legacy forged by the 4 brothers. Only one remaining to tell it. To remember. To sing. There is a reason Barry does not perform certain songs anymore. It has nothing to do with them being out of vogue. They were never meant to be solo songs, ever. They were born in beautiful harmony, between knowing glances, between aching gestures, shared rhythms left unspoken between brothers alone. Singing them by oneself just feels wrong, incomplete. And that is the kind of pain applause will never be able to heal. Perhaps the most haunting truth, on the other hand, lies not in the songs that he does get to sing, but rather in the songs that we may never hear. Take, for instance, the alleged tape of Andy. The existence of the tape, or otherwise, is secondary. The mystery speaks volumes. Why would Barry not put it out? Why keep his brother's last whisper away from the world? Some songs are not for the world. They are for healing, for absolution, for silence, for the things that words and even melodies cannot fix. Which Bee Gees song do you think holds the most emotion? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want more untold stories, the kind that hide behind the spotlight and echo in silence, subscribe to Retro Waves and watch the next video on screen. Because legends aren't just remembered, they're felt.